Okay, we're live.
Thank you.
There's a bit of an echo, so just make sure everyone's muted. Okay, good evening and welcome to this virtual South of the Borough Neighbourhood Committee, and welcome to those members of the public watching on the Council's YouTube channel. My name is Henry Yellop, a member of the Democratic Services team at Kingston Council. I'll now introduce councillors at the meeting, so can you just say a quick hello? So Councillor Archer.
Hello.
And Councillor Bamford has sent her apologies. Councillor Dunstan.
Good evening.
Councillor Goodship.
Good evening.
Councillor Kirsch.
Good evening.
Councillor Stewart.
Good evening.
Councillor Thompson.
Good evening.
Councillor Thailand.
Good evening.
And Councillor Young.
Good evening, everyone.
The only item on the agenda is the election of the Chair and Vice Chair of the South of the Borough Neighbourhood Committee for the rest of the municipal year 2020 to 2021. I call upon the councillors present to make nominations for the Chair of this committee.
Henry, I would like to nominate Councillor Lorraine Dunstan for Chair of South of the Borough Neighbourhood Committee.
I have a nomination for Councillor Lorraine Dunstan as Chair for the rest of the municipal year. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
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 What a seconder.
Yeah, I will second it.
Oh, second it. Okay, thank you. There's been no indications to go to a vote. Therefore, Councillor Dunstan is confirmed as the Chair. Councillor Dunstan, as the incoming Chair, I'll invite you to take the chair.
Thank you, Henry, and thank you, colleagues. So the next item is for nomination of Vice Chair. So do I have a nomination for Vice Chair, please?
Yes, I would like to nominate Councillor Stephanie Archer.
Thank you, Councillor Young. And can I have a seconder?
Yeah, I will second it.
Thank you, Councillor Thailand. Is there any other indications to put in the chat at all? Lovely. There's nothing in. There's no indications in the chat, so therefore it's confirmed as Councillor Stephanie Archer as Vice Chair of South of the Borough Committee. Thank you very much indeed. I just wanted, before we close, because obviously this is the only item on the agenda, I just wanted to sort of make a mention that it's been, the last time we met was obviously in March before we went into lockdown. And I felt it at this point it might be appropriate to hold a minute's silence to remember those who've lost their lives during this period to COVID-19, and to think about the loved ones that have been left behind. So I'll call for a 1 minute silence if that's all right with colleagues. Thank you. Thank you. So for members of the Neighbourhood Committee who will not be taking part in the Planning Subcommittee, thank you for this evening and good night. This concludes the South of the Borough Neighbourhood Committee at 7:34. We'll now go straight into the meeting of South of the Borough Planning Subcommittee. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the South of the Borough Planning Subcommittee. The first item of the agenda is the appointment of chair for this planning subcommittee meeting. Could I call for nominations for chair, please?
Yes, I would like to nominate Councillor Andreas Kirsch.
Do I have a seconder?
Yes, I'll second it.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to go to a vote? If so, please indicate in the chat function now. No, so everyone's agreed to Councillor Kirsch for the chair. Thank you. Councillor Kirsch is in the chair.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to this virtual South of the Borough Planning Subcommittee, and welcome to those members of the public watching on the Council's YouTube channel. My name is Andreas Kirsch. I'm Councillor for Chessington South, and I will chair this Neighbourhood Planning Subcommittee. Members and officers, can I please ask you to ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or in silent mode for the duration of the meeting. This meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's YouTube channel, and a copy of the recording will be available on the channel shortly after the meeting. Members and officers are reminded to keep their microphones on mute unless they are called to speak. Members can indicate that they wish to speak via using the meeting chat function. Please do not use this chat function to ask questions to officers or councillors because they will not be answered. Members of the public are reminded that the planning application process is constrained by the need to have regard to current planning policy at national, regional and local levels, as well as all other material planning considerations, including case law precedents. The decision-making process is often described as quasi-judicial because local planning authorities have to act reasonably within the bounds of planning law and the above considerations, and are not free to determine planning applications simply because of the weight of public opinion. Before we move to the item on the agenda, I would like to introduce the councillors present remotely on this evening at the meeting, and which then will decide what actions this committee will take. We also have a number of officers present whose cameras are switched off and who are here to advise the committee on issues before it. First, I will introduce the councillors and then I come to the officers. So present tonight as member of the committee are Councillor Stephanie Archer, Councillor Sharon Young, and Councillor Dennis Goodship. And under the constitutional procedure rule number 27, Councillors Lorraine Dunstan and Councillor Ty Thailand have asked to address this committee. If there is this agreed by anybody to allow them to address the committee?
Agreed.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. Officers present today is Toby Feltham, Lead Planning Officer. He will be presenting shortly the item and answering all the planning questions we might have. Then we have Henry Yallop. You already have heard him. He has kindly introduced this meeting, and he is from Democratic Services, taking us through and supporting us through this meeting. And there are also other officers from IT, which are providing support to this meeting in the background. The cameras and microphones of officers will be switched off unless they are called upon to speak on matters other than the provision of procedural advice. There is a registration scheme for residents and applicants wishing to participate on the planning application that will be considered by this committee. The deadline for registration to speak was 10 a.m. on Tuesday, the 14th of July. We have members of the public who have registered to speak and will be contacted by the appropriate time to notify them to join the meeting. If we are unable to get in contact with a member of the public and they are unable to join the meeting, we will read out on their behalf a written statement which they have supplied to us in advance. But as it looks so far, both members of the public are here and so that seems to be fine. Next item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Henry, could you please give us who has apologized for absence?
Can I just quickly check, Councillor Stewart, will you be taking part in this meeting?
No, at the moment I'm just observing, okay?
Okay, there are no apologies for absence. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Henry. Next on the agenda is declaration of interests. Are there any members who have to declare an interest, a disclosable pecuniary interest, and any other non-pecuniary interest, EA, personal interest, relevant to the items on this agenda?
No, Chair.
Please... No. Stephanie?
No.
And Dennis?
No.
Thank you very much. I also don't have to declare any interest. Next on the agenda is the minutes. The committee is asked to confirm the minutes of the meeting the committee held on the 7th of January in 2020. Are there any objections to approving the minutes as accurate?
No, Chair.
No.
No.
Okay, then the minutes from the last meeting are accepted and I will sign them at a later date. Okay, tonight we are here for planning application item 20/00505 full day 63 Verona Drive in Tolvers KT6 5AJ. And could Toby Feltham please introduce the item?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will just get this up for you. So hopefully you can now see the Welcome to the Royal Borough of Kingston upon Thames front sheet.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you all see that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this application is for the demolition of existing garages and the erection of 8 semi-detached dwelling houses with associated parking, which is 2 for each of the 3-bedroom units and 1 space for each of the 2-bedroom units. So this shows you the existing site within Verona Drive. It contains a number of garages at the moment, so they can see the location of those there. And here's some photos which show those garages there and there. And this just shows you the elevations. You'll see that the site is between existing houses and actually backs on to houses, well, gardens of houses behind, and is opposite houses as well. So here we have the proposed development, which is 4 pairs of semi-detached houses. It's worth just noting while you're here that 19.4 meters is the distance between the closest residential properties opposite and the proposed residential properties. This also shows there's a area to one side which provides 8 parking spaces. So 4 of those are intended to replace the 4 parking spaces which were allocated to Verona Drive residents and use for parking within the existing garages, and the other 4 are to replace there's some on pavement parking currently which takes place in front of here, and those other 4 would replace those. So these would be available to provide some compensation for parking that will be lost and the garages that will be lost. Just in terms of these residential units, so the ground floor is kitchen and lounge. They've got a garden area which is 38 square meters. for each, and as I say, two parking spaces for the central 4 units, which have extra accommodation in the roof. And this just shows the first floor plan, which is 2 bedrooms on each of those floors, and then in the central ones, additional bedrooms on the 2nd floor. And this just shows you the roof plan. So you'll see the 2 at the end have sort of hipped roofs, and the ones in the middle have gable end. You'll see probably better on the elevation shortly. This just gives you an idea of the length of the garden. So the gardens proposed will be 6.65 metres, and the distance to the closest part of the properties to the rear is 18.5. This just shows the elevation of the end units, and the proposed floor plans of those end units. And these are for the central units, and this shows the elevations. These would have gable-ended ends, and the rear would be a roof dormer set within the proposed roof. And this shows you the street scene that would result. So the one at the top is the street scene of Verona Drive. Will be the street scene of Verona Drive. Worth noting that the maximum height of these are 8.6 metres from the ground level. So this application is recommended for approval. I'll just give you a little bit more information. So in 2018, an application was submitted on this site for 8 maisonettes, which was withdrawn. That's the advice of officers, and this came in instead. We've received 16 objections to this application. The neighbourhood engineer from Kingston has raised no objection, subject to conditions and a legal agreement relating to construction management plan and the replacement car parking that are referred to, and car club membership. In terms of this assessment of this application, really, the council are unable to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and this development would provide 8 additional residential units, including 4 family units. The garden size will be 38 square metres, which is below the standard or the policy guidance, which would ideally be 53 to 54 square metres. This would weigh against the development, but this would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the proposal, and therefore the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Toby. And before we now move to the objector and the applicant from the public, I would like to invite Councillor Dunstan and Councillor Thailand, who indicated that they want to wish under procedural rule 27 to give their speeches. And there are, in theory, no restrictions on the length of your speech, but in some sort of a level playing field, I would ask you kindly if you could, as the other members of the public have to try to stay in 5 minutes, please. And Councillor Wayne Dunstan, if you please address the committee with your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues, for allowing me to speak. Firstly, I just want to say I'm extremely surprised and disappointed that the Highways engineer has brought no objections to this application, particularly when there has been LIT funding allocated 2016-17 to Verona Drive to try and resolve parking and, most importantly, safety issues within the drive. The road is highly congested, with firstly an overflow of parking from teachers' housing accommodation at the rear end of Verona Drive. They have, I don't know who's been down there, but it's there are flats down there. They have a controlled parking area for 1 car per flat. And further parking needs to be paid for, which tends not to happen because everyone has their 1 free car, and then the additional car parking is taken and the remainder of Verona Drive. Any additional parking is taken by employees, the shops in Hook Road, where they have no parking areas at all, and additional local residential roads are also highly parked with very little available space. The small fronted properties, or those behind the green areas in Verona Drive, are unable to have street parking due to RBK policy, and those on the other side tend to be rented, and landlords will not pay for off-street parking provision. At the present time, there is no official passing spots, with cars having to reverse if they come across a vehicle coming the other way. This road does not have capacity for any further parking needs. Only this week, I've been receiving photos and reports of cars and vans parking on the green area. Whilst obviously this is not allowed, it shows how desperate the area is for car parking. In 2016, there was a consultation for a controlled parking zone. Unfortunately, at that time, it was not something residents in there were other roads that were included, and they didn't want to take it forward in sufficient numbers. But I know there's been a big shift in feelings on this. And sorry, I've just lost my space. So maybe this is something developer would consider looking into and paying for, and within that ensuring that all those on the new development could not apply for a permit. With a PTAL rating of 2 to 1A, a car is almost a necessity. I'm not sure that construction site traffic will be able to get through at the present time, and I'm worried that if they attempt to get through and a vehicle comes the other way, this is going to cause friction and obvious frustration. I have big concerns about the construction staff parking arrangements, as this will have a negative impact on residents in this area, and that applies not only to those in Verona Drive, but also in the surrounding roads. It's also a major concern that because of the narrowness of the road, access by emergency vehicles will be hindered quite significantly. I am also concerned that the road may need closures to the works and that residents will be unable to move freely. Would the developer be prepared to look at paying to open the space at the other end of Verona Drive temporarily as a way to ensure that there is acceptable traffic management? I'm actually quite happy that something's going to be done with this underused and, underused area. I have to say undermarketed as well, and that the development complies with DM13. I'm very concerned about the amenity space, though. There are no local park areas, and as a family-sized houses, I would have thought that minimum policy so amenity space would be imperative. The report also makes no mention of loss of light to residents on the other side of Verona Drive, or indeed the neighbours of the development. So in conclusion, I feel that whilst in principle I welcome the development, I believe that the overwhelming highways issues and the lack of amenity space need to be overcome first before this proposed development should be able to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dunstan. Councillor Thailand, could you please address the committee now?
Thank you, Chair. When we were informed by Development Control about this application, I wrote to the Planning Department raising my concerns and requesting it to be brought to the Neighbourhood Committee if the officers are inclined to approve it. My main concerns are parking pressures, congestion, flow, traffic, and disruption during the construction phase. I think these are the main concerns of all the objectors, but it is worth repeating them again to stress the importance of these issues to the residents. There have been few long-standing issues on Verona Drive, mainly with traffic flow and parking. There were petitions raised in the past and various schemes were looked at, but no acceptable solutions have been found yet. LIP funding was allocated 3 years ago to look at ways to resolve parking and safety issues within the area. It is currently sitting in the LIP scheme of RBK neighbourhood projects. Borough Drive is a narrow road. Parking is at a premium due to the council drop curb policy, not permitting properties with small front gardens and those behind the green areas to have drop curb. Residents' cars are normally parked nose to tail on one side of the road, making it effectively a single lane, not enough space for two-way traffic. There are no passing areas either. The vehicles have to often reverse to find a space without parked vehicles, or drive onto the pavement, which is usually the case, to let the car coming in the opposite direction pass through. The additional vehicles due to this development will definitely make the situation from bad to worse. Part of the pavement outside this development area is currently used for parking vehicles, as shown on the presentation earlier. This will not be possible after the development. Even with the additional parking facility provided by the development, there will be a net loss in parking spaces. The construction phase will bring extra traffic, including HEV and large vehicles going up and down the road. Parking in this area may have to be suspended and road may have to be closed. This will cause more problems for the residents. It will be chaotic. This will lead to anger, frustration, and complaints. I appreciate the need for more houses. I welcome the development in this derelict area with unused garages in bad condition. It's good to see this area being developed, but not at the expense of making the issue worse for the residents. I'm also concerned about the lack of adequate amenity space for the families and lack of affordable housing. I think a solution for these issues have to be found before any more developments are permitted. It is in the interest of the developers as well, as it will be difficult for them to market the new properties with these existing issues. As a LIP funding is in place and Verona Drive is in highways program for this municipal year, I hope a solution acceptable to residents can be found in the near future for this development to go ahead. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Tai. So we are now moving to the objector, and we have one registered objector this evening. Peter Shakeshaft will speak as an objector. Very welcome to the meeting, Mr. Shakeshaft. Can you please now address the committee with your comments? You are reminded that you have 5 minutes to speak, and we will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining. Mr. Shakeshaft, unfortunately, can't hear you.
Mr. Shakeshaft, are you able to use your phone for audio like last time when we did that test? Okay.
Thank you, Henry. So we wait a bit longer in the hope to sort the issues we have with reaching audio with Mr. Shakeshaft.
Are you able to access the use your phone for audio part in the settings? It should come up with a number and then entering a PIN. I do have a copy of the applicant statement that I can read out if there are issues. If you'd like to do that, Mr. Shakeshaft, just give me a nod. Okay, unfortunately, we're not able to hear from Mr. Shakeshaft, so I'll have to read out his statement. Just give me 1 second.
Thank you, Henry. I'm very sorry for Mr. Shakeshaft that we can't make a proper audio connection.
Okay, Fiona, if you'd like to start the time shortly.
Yes, I will do, Henry.
Okay, so Verona Drive was built in the 50s. Car parking at dwellings was not provided. Garages built for rent are too small for modern cars, in brackets Fiesta maximum size, close brackets, and crossovers are forbidden under the lease granted by the developer, so there is no alternative to on-road parking. Parking reduces the carriageway to 1 vehicle width for most of its length. Vehicles pass using the pavement or by reversing. Bin lorries and similar, e.g. Argos and Technicons, run with wheels on the pavement most of the way to avoid removing mirrors. Tuesdays, bin collection days, cause 20 to 30-minute delays to journeys if mistimed. This development will increase demand for on-street parking by a minimum of 17 extra vehicles. The road is fully parked at about 85 vehicles with lots of informal parking. Adding another 20% would result in more vehicles cascading to Tolworth Road / Kent Way. Survey data is available if required. It should be noted that the drive also provides the only vehicular access to the Teachers Housing Association estate of some 80 flats. Emergency vehicles, such as fire or ambulances, currently have to proceed at walking pace to pass safely. During development, emergency vehicle access must be maintained. This can only be achieved safely by routing all deliveries via the pedestrian access off Hook Road and delivering to the site via forklift truck. Planning regulations require an amenity area of 50 square metres per dwelling. Only 38 square metres are provided. I am amazed that the planning department has such a weak grasp of arithmetic and strong grasp of doublespeak that it can say that an area 25% below the minimum meets the minimum requirement. Many of the existing gardens are less than 50 square metres. This has proved problematic for parents wanting to exercise their children during lockdown. It should be noted that the 3-bedroom dwellings planned will probably house 6 adults. The gardens will be far too small. A pine tree in an adjoining garden in Kent Way is approximately 20 metres tall and together with a smaller tree keeps most of the rear of the development in shade until lunchtime. The trees and shade have, it seems, been ignored by planning. The style of the proposed development is out of keeping with the rest of the drive and will stand out like a sore thumb. In order to provide parking, the building line has been pushed back away from the road, thus restricting the garden space and presenting a dog's hind leg look in at what is an otherwise homogeneous appearance. The density in brackets PTAL impact on character of area fails CS8 DM10 LDF core strategy. Separation from Kent Way, less than 7.5 metres, and sustainability not provided were all raised in objections, but the planning department has glossed over or not addressed them. The future. It is accepted by the community that development is inevitable. The proposed development will increase parking congestion and pose difficulties during construction, and unless modified, will adversely impact the community in the long term. I looked at the problem from a business point of view and conducted a survey which asked for opinions on introductions of a controlled parking zone for Verona Drive, hours to be 4 p.m. till midnight, implementation of end-on parking on the green space running from numbers 2 to 34, negotiation with LH Development to redevelop the garages for at the start of the drive and the Scout Hut into open parking spaces sized for modern cars for 96%, in the second point for 98%. 60 households were canvassed out of a potential 74, 10 others empty or unavailable. The propositions would generate revenue for the council, CPD and fines, increase the parking space available substantially, and provide spaces for EV charging points, which would otherwise be impossible. Allow the developer to redesign to maintain the look, as well as increase the size of the proposed properties and provide 2 parking spaces per, as well as maintain revenue from the garage sites. In the event that permission is granted, I would ask the following conditions be applied to the consent. All deliveries to site be made via the alleyway off the Hook Road and transfer to site via forklift truck / side loader. This is to ensure that access for emergency vehicles is not blocked. All mixing to be carried out on site, i.e. no cement deliveries by truck. The pavements have recently been relayed and would soon be destroyed by heavy delivery vehicles. Site vans, etc. not to arrive before 7:45 in the morning to allow residents to travel to work unimpeded and thus create parking spaces for the vans. In summary, I would ask the committee to refuse permission until the developer presents an application which reflects the views of residents and gives us an improved environment. I can forward this on to all members of the committee now, just to have a look at the wording.
Thank you very much, Henry. Before we now move to the applicant, later on, after the applicant, we have the opportunity for members of the committee to ask Mr. Shakeshaft questions. Obviously, we have already tricky technical issues. Whilst we are having the applicant speaking, could someone from Democratic Services and IT please confirm if we get a line open with Mr. Shakeshaft for questions? If not, then obviously, unfortunately, we couldn't ask him any questions. Is that possible, Henry, to try this?
Yeah, we can try that.
Okay, thank you very much. So Chris Smith has registered to speak on behalf of the applicant. Good evening, Mr. Smith. Sorry, Mr. Smart. My fault. Apologize deeply. Sorry. Mr. Smart, very welcome this evening. Could you please now address the committee with your comments? And I also remind you that you have 5 minutes to speak. We will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when the time is up. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, we have had, or my client has had long and involved meetings with the planning officer and with highways engineers, hence the scheme that has been submitted. And we are confident that the provision of 8 new houses to replace what are 36 pretty unusable garages is going to be of long-term benefit to the road. We've provided parking insofar as it will meet the criteria, and we're providing extra parking spaces on site to replace those that are presently allocated rather dangerously on the pavement. Obviously, if our client had to fence the site, those parking spaces would effectively become unusable anyway. But we have, or the client has, provided 4 replacement spaces just for that purpose, so they could be relocated. The original application that went in 2018, we thought met planning criteria, but the type of housing was considered by the officers to be unsuitable, and hence the change for family units, family houses. The layouts fine. The amenity space at the back is smaller than required by council policy, but the discussions with the planning office clearly supported a development of what is a very untidy site to provide housing in the way we're doing. It just goes to help with the housing need within the borough. All of the objections were considered, and we do sympathise with the fact that there, short term during the construction phase, there is bound to be disturbance. We can't get away from that. It is a fact of life that it will have to occur. We haven't got an alternative. So from that perspective, the parking problems in the road are what they are, and what is being proposed by the developer does not worsen that in terms of long-term housing. And we have said that we will get transport specialists in to deal with parking during the construction phase for construction vehicles, staff vehicles, and so forth. So I think that is something that can be dealt with by way of condition, as has been proposed, and we haven't got any further comment in that regard. I can't quite see the question of daylighting and affecting people. Now, there's 16.8 metres to the properties opposite. That would not effectively cause any loss of light, and to the buildings at the back, it certainly doesn't. They're even further away. And as for the houses to the south and the flats to the north, the flats to the north are themselves going to be something in the order of 10 to 12 metres away. So it leaves the house to the south, but with that, it is to the south. Sunlight will be enjoyed by it from the south.
1 minute remaining.
Thank you. So we don't believe that there is any issue as far as that is concerned. I think that is all we have to say. I don't think there's anything else I can add. It's been considered by planning officers. It's been considered by the highways engineers. Both are supporting it, subject to conditions. And I would request the committee do likewise. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smart. So, Henry, have we an open line, Mr. Shakeshaft?
I think he's currently trying to use his phone for audio now. We'll just see how that works.
Brilliant. Yeah. So just let's test this, please.
I think you're still muted. So if you unmute yourself on the computer, Mr. Shakeshaft.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
There
we go.
Okay. Yeah.
Brilliant.
I'm on the
apologies
phone.
again, Mr. Shakeshaft, that it didn't work with your presentation, but I think at least Henry has read out it very well, and he also sent a copy to all councillors so that we have it in writing as well. So I ask now all my colleagues if they have any questions to you. So please bear with us. If any member has any questions, please could you indicate with the chat function that you would like to ask a question, please. Sharon, you first, and after you, Steph. Sharon, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Shakeshaft. As Councillor Kerr says, I'm really sorry that you couldn't get the audio to read your objections, but Henry has sent us through and I've had another look. And just wanted to pick up a couple of your points. So you spoke about, you called them the pine trees at the back of Kent Way. So I walked around Verona Drive on Monday afternoon and I had a look at the site, and there are two huge Leylandii just on the opposite side. I noticed that there hasn't been done a light impact assessment of the property and the development, how that would impact Kent Way. But also the two huge Leylandii would also have an impact on the properties that are being developed. So that was my observation, that something would need to be done about those trees. I don't know if officers have a reply to that. The other point I was going to raise as well was about the parking, and I was going to ask what consultations had been done. Now, Councillor Dunstan did make the point that there was a consultation on CPZ, but that was turned down. That wasn't in favour at the time. You also mentioned the green outside houses number 2 to 34, because that's what I noticed when I was in the road, that the cars were parked end to end. And I wondered, and this was coming on to a question for Toby as well, sorry that they overlap, but whether the LIP funding could be used, or whether there has been a consultation on using part of that grass area for parallel parking bays in the style that's been done on Durbin Road. But I did hear Councillor Dunstan earlier say, I think, that wasn't RBK policy. So I don't know who might be able to help me clear that.
Councillor Young, could we please stick at the moment to questions to Mr. Shakeshaft, and could you repeat the other question later on to Toby, please? Thanks.
Yeah. On the introduction of a controlled parking zone and on the end-on parking, and in fact on the demolition of the garage and converting them to street-level parking spaces, I consulted 60 households, 62 people signatures on those 3 propositions, because basically we want to make this a business situation. If the developer gets more money for his site, we get more parking, the council gets more revenue. At the moment, the only people, the developer makes money, everyone else suffers the aggravation, and that will include councillors when we complain bitterly. So what I'm trying to do is to give options where the drive will be improved, will make it more attractive for the developers to sell their properties, which will be real stickers if they develop as they are now, and it will make a better environment. And also for the future, at the moment, there's no way you could charge an electric vehicle in Borough Drive. I'm sure you'll agree. There's no way you could put a charging point. If we have end-on parking, some of those could be converted to EV charging points at some time in the future. That would, this is a bit of future-proofing, and it works. It creates a better environment for us as residents. It creates money for the council. It creates a better situation for the developer.
Thank you. Yes, I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shakeshaft. Thank you, Sharon. Steph, could you please now ask your question to Mr. Shakeshaft, please?
Okay, I've got a couple of questions. But first of all, could you just repeat again what you just said to Sharon in terms of what you see as like the kind of silver bullet scenario? Can you just repeat that to me again so I can get my head around what you're saying?
Sure. What I asked the residents, 3 questions. Okay. Would they participate? Would they approve a CPZ? And everyone was 96% said yes. Of the 60 registered said yes. Obviously the hours have got to be 4 p.m. to midnight, otherwise we'll never get parked ourselves. The implementation of end-on parking on the green space running up from numbers 2 to 34 on the right. If we have end-on parking there, we'll increase that parking by about 50%, parking capacity by about 50%. And it will give us EV stuff, EV charging. And if we can get the developer to knock down the garages at the Scout Hut and at the entry to the road on the left and convert them to lockable, rentable parking spaces, they will, we can move quite a few of the vans off the road, because the guys in vans want to be able to park anywhere. They want to be able to come home and park their vans and then go to them in the morning, not have to worry about parking. So the developer can make money that way.
Thank
you. So they don't lose all the money. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Shakeshaft. My apologies. We have, for the questions to the objector and question to the applicant, is all in all between all members only 5 minutes. I should have made that perhaps clear again before we opened that session. My apologies to members and members of the public for not doing so. And if democratic service officers would agree, if I may seek their advice, as I forgot to mention that again to everybody, and Councillor Young had asked also a question in regards to Toby, which I asked her kindly to ask later again. Could we give an additional minute for Mr. Shakeshaft and then also add an additional minute to Mr. Smart potentially? Then, so in order to keep the fairness to both object and applicants, would it be okay under procedural rules?
Yeah, absolutely, Chair.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So, Steph, could you please then ask your other question to Mr. Shakeshaft, please? And give 1 minute for question and answer.
Oh, okay. So the conditions that you also want to be put on to the application, obviously you've got this ideal scenario here for the parking. The other conditions you wanted to be put on, can you just explain them again?
Yes, are you familiar with the alley access off the Hook Road? It runs between the shops and the Teachers Housing Association.
Yeah, I know the one.
That was used, this method was used when they built the extension to the THA flats. They reversed trucks down there, offloaded over the wall and moved them onto site. In that case, it's only a small move by forklift truck, but everything should come off at that point and be forklifted or side loaded round to site. The reason being, if you get a brick lorry unloading on site, you won't get a police car or an ambulance or a fire engine up there in less than 15 minutes so you've got to make sure the roadway is clear, no unloading on the road, and the only way you can do that is with forklifting it in.
Time, Chair.
Thank you, Fiona. Thank you very much, Steph, and thank you very much, Mr. Shakeshaft. You may now leave the meeting, and you still can follow the rest of the proceedings via our YouTube stream. I hope you're familiar how to do this.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Cheers.
Thank
you very much. Thank you. Bye.
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 We are now moving to questions to the applicant. Again, we have 6 minutes now, to be fair. Can councillors please indicate if they would like to ask a question to Mr. Smart? Sharon?
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to speak quicker this time. So reading through the agenda, I can see that on A10, under point 5J, it talks about the contractor agreeing parking for staff and site traffic. So my question is, I know that when staff drive to a site, that can cause a lot of additional traffic, and we all realise that there isn't room in Verona Drive to accommodate that. Could there be, and I've seen this done on other building sites, a restriction of 500 metres around Verona Drive where site workers may not park, and that is managed and overseen by the site manager? Would that be an option? That's my first question.
I think it would be very difficult to enforce, obviously, because builders will be builders. But the intention is that on site, one would keep the proposed car parking area available for vehicles, goods vehicles, delivery vehicles, and similarly have space for some of the contractors' vehicles as well. Whether it can be enforced over that sort of area, I don't know, but we have said that we've got a traffic consultant who's advising us, and we have said that they will be liaising with highways on these sorts of issues to mitigate the problems as far as the residents are concerned and the use of the roads are concerned. I know it was brought up just now about using an access through from where the shops are. We haven't got any rights over that, and I can't see that we can bring that into the thing that we're dealing with, the application we're dealing with at the moment.
I can just see that as the site expands, that there isn't going to be room for site workers to park, and residents are going to become more frustrated, and that, of course, wouldn't be ideal. My other question is that in point 5L, you mentioned agreeing hours for construction and delivery of goods. Now, I think, as Mr. Shakeshaft pointed out, ideally not before 7:45 or not too early in the morning, because it would not only disturb residents, but it would be of benefit to allow some residents to leave in their cars and get to work and school before construction traffic came on site. So I don't know if that's anything you can give any reassurances about.
I think normally construction traffic is from 8 o'clock in the morning, and I don't envisage any problems like that. I do know that there are obviously issues maybe with the school, and we
have 3 minutes remaining.
And obviously the residents are getting in and out with cars pre 9 o'clock. So I think we'd be, the construction work would have to be sympathetic to that, and we can again work with highways, the highways engineer, to agree a sensible plan as far as that's concerned. Yes, there will be some disturbance. There is bound to be, but we've got a site here that is suitable for development, and to get it developed, we need to get bricks and mortar in there, among other things. It's a bit of a compli, really.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Mr. Smart. And Councillor Archer indicated that she has a question as well.
Okay.
Hello, yes. So the objector mentioned there's more garages that could possibly be demolished as well to provide actually more parking. Are you aware of the garages he's talking about, and do you know if that's a possibility?
Yes, I'm aware of it, and I don't think we're making one, or we're needing to demolish one, maybe two of those, to make way for additional parking that we've promised would be, or indicated that would be available in connection with this scheme. As to the garages at the other end, they're not part of the site. I don't believe that it would be reasonable to bring those into this application. I have no more to say, really.
Yeah. So with your highways engineer that's going to be looking at the highway, have they not yet been then to look at it?
Oh yeah, no, all the highways proposals to date have been agreed between your highways engineer and Motion, who are a traffic and highways company.
Okay, so they looked at that, the narrowness of Verona Drive, and they did feel it was possible.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's all my questions, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smart. Thank you, Stephanie. We have roughly less than 1 minute left. If any other questions to Mr. Smart, short one, or are we done? Okay. So thank you, Mr. Smart, for presenting the application and for answering the question. And I also would like you to ask to now leave the meeting, and you're also invited to follow the proceedings on our YouTube stream. I hope you're familiar doing this.
I'll work it out.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you. So thank you all. Next on our agenda is a sweep up by the planning officer. So Toby, before we move to questions to officers, could you please sweep up our proceedings so far?
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so a number of issues raised there. I suppose it's, in terms of parking, it's worth just setting out what the London plan says, and the London plan has maximum parking standards for developments, and it would say the maximum parking for the 3-bedroom units should be 1.5 spaces. Now we're actually exceeding the maximum here, because this will provide 2 spaces per unit. and for 2-bedroom units, the standard is less than 1 space per unit. Now we're provide 1 space per unit, so this exceeds actually the maximum parking standards within the London plan. But you know, we recognise the particular circumstances here, and obviously the 8 parking spaces which would be there to replace effectively what's lost. So that's just really sort of background to understanding the parking situation and the efforts that have gone to provide. I think it's 20 parking spaces for you know, these 8 units and for people to use in the surrounding area. The other thing which was mentioned was about the light to surrounding occupiers. So we do reference it in the report, in that we talk about this not having a significant impact on light. What I've done is just calculated what the angle would be if you take the window of facing properties and you look at the angle that would take with the ridge of the proposed units. And by my calculations, that comes to something like 16, 17 degrees. Now, the Building Research Establishment Sunlight and Daylighting guideline would say that if you have the angle below 25 degrees, then those units will still retain very good access to daylight. So this at 16 or 17 degrees is well below that, so there would be effectively a good view of the sky from the properties opposite, which would be the most affected, but they would not be significantly affected. Obviously there would be a change in outlook, and they would be facing something that was a bit bigger, but it wouldn't result in a significant loss of light. And that would really apply to the properties that adjoin the development. And yes, I mean, we've acknowledged in the report that the garden sizes are not do not meet the 53 or 54 square meters, but they overall, we consider that these do provide good standard of accommodation, which meets the sort of London plan standards, and would provide 8 good residential units. If there's anything else that you want me to cover, then no doubt you'll ask. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Okay, we are now moving to questions to Toby. And please, again, if you could indicate on the chat function that you have a question to Toby. And if you had one question and then others are having questions and you have a second question later on, so please then indicate again, there's no issue. I also take you twice with questions, so no issue there. So first on the list is Stephanie, please.
Hi, Toby, thank you.
And then it's Dennis so far.
So, Andreas, do you only want me to ask one question at a time?
Yeah, perhaps.
Okay. So just in terms of the objectors' suggestions on the parking, knocking down additional garages, is there any way that we could add that as a condition?
So my understanding is that these garages are not related to the site. I've sort of been trying to work out where these are. I mean, I think the issue here really is that this development more than provides for the parking that it generates or could generate, and also provides 8 additional parking spaces. I don't consider that it would be reasonable for it to have to do anything more than that. And in fact, we only ask for controlled parking zone contributions where developments are under providing parking. Now, as I explain, this is actually over providing parking.
Okay.
So I think the answer would be no.
Okay, thank you.
Steph, if you have not, I think it's reasonable if you continue with your questions. What I meant when I started was that if you have, let's say, asked 2 or 3 questions and then others are asking questions, that does not mean that you're not allowed to come back again if you have an additional question whilst others are asking questions. So please carry on.
Yeah, lovely. Toby, in terms of the vehicles getting in and out of Verona Drive, the heavy goods vehicle, you know, the building trade vehicles that are going to be bringing in cement and all that kind of stuff, you know, honestly, do you think it is safe and possible for them to do this on Verona Drive? Hello?
Toby, you're muted.
Apologies, sorry. Sorry again. So yes, our engineers have looked at this, and they've looked at a whole number of issues here, and they are happy that that can be done. They've obviously asked for a condition to be attached, and there's a number of details that will be required to be submitted in relation to that. I mean, in terms of getting access, I mean, this does allow access for refuse vehicles. So I think the vehicles should be able to get to this site. I suppose one of the questions that will need to be looked at is, well, you know, when they do get to the site, where do they deposit the materials? Now, that we would expect to be on the site, and that would mean that all of these vehicles would be off the road effectively. So I
think the point with the refuse vehicles, you know when your refuse vehicles come, everyone in the street just, you know, holds their breath and has to sit in at home for their refuse vehicle once a week. This is something that would be happening daily, and you don't know when the cement mix is going to arrive or this or that. I just find it, I'm flabbergasted. I'm just concerned that such a narrow road, that how they're gonna how the road will continue to function with these sort of works going on, just in light of the narrowness of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when we come to discharge a condition, so should this get permission and this condition is attached, we would look with our engineers to see, well, you know, what restrictions need to be made to ensure that this happens. You know, given that there are certain access restrictions, but you know, there will be a way of doing it, and certainly, you know, we wouldn't be in a position to refuse a planning application based on the challenges of constructing it. So, you know, that would come down the line, but our engineers have not raised an issue saying, well, this, you know, this is going to be a problem. They've moved to the stage of saying they're happy with this, subject to conditions.
Yeah.
And that, you know, believe me, they will object where they consider there are problems. So they haven't found any.
Okay. Thank you. That's me done for the moment. Thanks.
Thank you, Steph. Dennis is next, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's really regarding the highways technical note regarding the PTAL, where it says it does not provide a true reflection of the ability for future residents to travel to and from the site by sustainable transport modes for everyday activities. Can I have some sort of expansion on that? What does that actually mean?
Sorry, Toby, you're muted again.
Sorry. Where is that a quote from?
The highways technical note.
Oh, was submitted by the applicants.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose in general, the public transport accessibility level is done really on how many buses and other public transport passes, you know, reasonably close to a property such that somebody would make reasonable use of it. So I guess the most of that would go down Hook Road, although I think there are other buses which go through the area up to Red Lion Road. I mean, it's formulaic, and it does. And I suppose what it does do is once as you start to move further away from a main road, then you start to reduce your public transport accessibility level reasonably quickly. So I presume that's kind of what they're pointing to. I mean, in terms of the sort of London plan, as well as public transport accessibility, it also looks at this sort of ability of a certain area within a short walk to sort of sustain day-to-day living. And so, you know, you've got some shops on Hook Road, which mean that people could get sort of day-to-day, meet their day-to-day needs. You've got schools and other sort of facilities around as well. So that's another factor which people look at in terms of sort of locating, you know, whether developments are within a sustainable location. And you know, this, whilst not having a fantastic PTAL, it is a location where you may be able to live without needing to get in your car every day, or even without a car. So that's what that looks at. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wondered, I mean, is this going to generate more traffic if people decide, I don't want to use my car, and then or do they want to use the car but not sustainable transport?
Well, I mean, yes, it will. Obviously, if they do, then it will. There are options for people to not use their car here. I suppose the issue would be that if you, in terms of traffic, if you had these garages operating and full and used, then potentially there could be more traffic generated from those. So it would be a fairly light amount of traffic that would be generated from 8 residential units.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Dennis. Next one is Sharon, please.
Thank you, Chair. 2 easy questions. Toby, in your presentation, a few slides in, you mentioned a distance of 18.5 metres. And could you just confirm whether that's from the back of the amenity space on the development to the rear wall of the house in Kent Way? So effectively, there'd be 18.5 metres distance from the development property to the wall of Kent Way. Sorry, I can't read.
Toby, you're on mute again. Sorry. Toby, you're still on mute.
Apologies. Right, I'll share that with you again. Okay, so can you see the screen?
No, you're not sharing your screen.
It says I am, but
I can see it now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So the 18.5 meters is from the back of the garden of the proposed units to the nearest point of the properties which are in Kent Way, which have substantial gardens. And then you'll see the 6.65 is the distance from the wall between the Kent Way properties and the Verona Drive properties, and the back of those houses, or the proposed houses. Does that answer your question?
You're on mute, Councillor Young. Sorry.
Oh, actually, I've disappeared.
Sharon, you're still on mute. Sorry. Sharon? Toby, could you perhaps please close the presentation? I'm not sure if the presentation is any issue here. Thank you. Sharon, you're still on mute. Toby asked you if he answered your question. Sharon, can you hear me?
No, sorry. I will disappear. Let's go. I'll hang up and start again.
We can hear you, Sharon, now.
Now, Councillor. Yes, yes.
Okay. Sorry, my screen is frozen completely, but if you can hear me, that's fine. Sorry, yes, my second question. It says that the proposed development will generate MSIL and KSIL funding, but could you just confirm, please, Toby, whether this has been paused or changed post-COVID, or if that will still go ahead?
Yeah, that will still go ahead. Yes, absolutely. So that's, I think, £50 per square metre of development.
Okay, thank you very much. And my last question was, I don't think we've really had an answer to what happened to the LIP funding for 2016-17, and what has been looked into with regard to the parking issues. Mr. Shakeshaft mentioned 3 resident surveys that he'd conducted that all seemed to be reasonable ideas of improving the parking or congestion. But what have the council done in that respect?
Yeah, so I was trying to find some information on there. So as far as I can see, there was some issues raised about the speed of vehicles and trying to slow vehicles down, and the controlled parking zone. But I haven't found anything else other than that, and I haven't had a response from our engineers, who would be the people that would deal with that. So it's engineers that would deal with LIP funding. I don't think this would affect any of that, and it seems that there are other issues which could help to solve certain issues here. I mean, certainly the additional community infrastructure levy, I think a proportion of that goes to the local area, so that would bring some additional sort of funding from this development, which I'm not sure of the route to getting that money in relation to this, but there would be some additional money generated by this. I'm just trying to think what that sort of figure would be. So yeah, but in terms of these other things, then I don't think it relates to this application. So that probably doesn't answer your question very well, but
no, it doesn't really, because I see that the development and the ongoing congestion parking issues in Verona Drive are 2 separate issues, but of course the development and the construction of the development will just magnify the issues that are already there. So I will reserve this for comments, but I would be interested in seeing some parking issues improved before the construction went ahead. I
mean, certainly to removing the removing the parking which takes place on the pavement as it does at the moment and putting that into the 8 parking spaces that are proposed, I think would be an improvement, certainly for pedestrians. And I think probably is the only place where you have sort of vehicles parked on 2 sides of Verona Drive. Otherwise, people do just park on one side of Verona Drive. So by removing those vehicles and getting the parking all off street and all off pavement, I think would provide some benefit there.
Okay, thank you. I'll just raise for everybody's benefit that my screen has frozen, so I'm aware I can hear you and I'm aware that you can hear and see me, but I can't type anything in the chat function.
Councillor, would you like, or sorry, beg your pardon, Chair, through the Chair, would you like to take a moment to try and disconnect and rejoin?
Yes, I'll do that. I'll log out and then join again. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fiona. So we pause for waiting for getting Councillor Onion back.
I can't even hang up. I'm trying to hang up and it's not working. So I think I'll just stay here, if that's okay.
Okay, that's okay. And then I would say from the chair, I allow you to just chip in. So if you can't use the chat anymore, then just please, unmute yourself and chip in at an appropriate moment. Anybody else who would like to ask a question to Toby? No. Okay, if that's not the case, I would like to ask myself some questions. We had the representation from Councillor Thailand and from Councillor Dunstan, and we had the representation from the objector, Mr. Shakeshaft, and lots of things they mentioned, they were all the same. And especially if I obviously can't say from Mr. Shakeshaft, but Councillor Dunstan and Thailand said in principle they are welcoming the development as such, but they have grave concerns with the amenity spaces and they have grave concerns with the construction phase. And I am more than minded to share these concerns, especially if the construction for the time being, as the location sits, if you go there or if you just go to Google Maps or Bing Maps or whatever, if the road is blocked at 63 and nobody can go through, that's a grave issue and a grave concern in terms for emergency vehicles. There are many, many more houses and the teacher houses flats, so many, many more people live down that road. And if it's blocked and someone down the road has an emergency, so not just speaking of the nuisance of people just want to go whilst the construction worker blocking the road, that's something different. But if there's an emergency, then there's a real issue. Neither ambulance nor a fire brigade car or the police, if there is an issue with the police would be needed. Nobody could access there. And hence the question from me to you, Toby, I really see that as obviously that's not a material planning issue. It's not a reason to reject the planning application, but is there any chance for us to put into a condition either Mr. Shakeshaft was arguing for the forklift truck, or is there any chance for us as RBK, if you see how Verona Drive wrinkles itself around, basically, if it would have been completed, in the end it would hit Hook Road on again, parallel to the entrance where the entrance is, just a bit further down. And it's only a small strip of space which would be needed. There are car parking spaces on both sides, one for the shops and the other for the flats there. Is there any way for us, I'm not sure who is the landowner of these bits, is there any chance for temporarily creating an access, additional access for emergency vehicles? So if then the constructions work coming in, the usual Verona Drive would block the road, and emergency vehicle would be needed. The emergency vehicle could access via that route. Is there any chance, or going down the route as Mr. Shakeshaft suggested, is there any possibility for us to put it in as a condition?
Well, to me, it's not 100% clear that how easy it would be to get access through there, and I guess what we would want is our engineers to look at the best option for gaining access to this site. Now, it would seem on the face of it that the best access would be the existing one from Verona Drive. It provides good sight lines into and out of the end of Verona Drive. But I wouldn't really want to be in a position, nor do I think we could, restrict the ability of our engineers to look at this closely and to come up with the best solution with the applicants, highways engineers. So I don't think we should be in a position prescribing that at this stage, and I think there certainly remain doubts that it could actually be done that way anyway. So that would be my answer.
Thank you very much, Toby. And the other question is there, as the road is very narrow, is there any chance to put a condition in if the building works would destroy the pavement partly, that they pay for reinstating the pavement?
Yes, I think we would expect that to happen. Basically, that if there was any damage, then that is repaired. And actually, I'm just looking through our engineers' comments. But yes, certainly, I think we would expect that to happen anyway. Our engineers would be looking at, the condition of the existing pavement and road, and making sure that it is put back to at least as good as it was before. Yeah, I'm just seeing what it says there. So yes, but I mean, we can. Yeah, I'm just seeing whether we can add that particular aspect into the construction management plan to ensure that that aspect is considered. So yes, we've got a number of things. We've got A to L on condition 5. So we can look at adding in that element to there if that would help.
Thank you, Toby. Anybody else? Any further questions to Toby? Okay. Then before we move this to a debate, the item, I would like to remind my fellow members that we had late materials with some changes to conditions. So I hope you all have had a chance to acknowledge the late material. Okay, brilliant. So then I will formally move the recommendations to the debate, and I would need someone to second to move it to the debate.
Happy to second.
Thank you. So now members have the chance to give their comments. We ended the question session to Toby, so you now please give your thoughts and ideas about the development before we then move to a decision. Sharon, would you like to start, because you can't indicate via the chat function?
Yes, I can. So I'm familiar with Verona Drive. I lived on Kent Way, and I'm familiar that you can drive through past the Scout Hut. And I think Verona Drive, I visited recently on Monday. I think it's a really nice road. It's a busy road, but it has a really nice feel about it. I think that the garages are an eyesore, so it's okay that something else comes instead. And looking at the development proposals, I don't have any strong objections to the 3-bed houses. I appreciate that they do have sort of loft rooms, but I think there are a lot of houses that have an extension, a loft conversion, and have that appearance anyway. I appreciate there isn't very much amenity space, but I have lived with my 4 children in a range of properties, ranging from a very large garden to none to a communal area. So I think that when you buy a property, you buy it knowing that that is your amenity space. So I don't have any particular objections to the development as it stands. What I do really see as an issue, and I appreciate that this is a council issue and not a development issue, is the parking and the access for works traffic into Verona Drive, and the difficulties for residents already living there. And as I've said, I appreciate that it isn't directly to do with the development, but because of the development, should it go ahead, I think these issues are really brought to the forefront. And I think that we as a council need to address the parking and access issues before we allow the development to go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Steph, you indicated that you would like to speak next. So.
Yes, I mean, I just wholeheartedly agree with Sharon. I think it's a lovely proposal of family homes, which is a lovely thing to see. And yeah, is redeveloping what is currently an eyesore. And yeah, eight family homes. So, and I think yeah, it's kind of come out quite loud and clear tonight that there's a huge parking issue, but actually that's a separate issue to this development. And I really feel that we need to do something about this the parking for the guys on Verona Drive before we go ahead with this. You know, I just think, yeah, something needs. I just worry so much for kind of those big vehicles coming through. It gets congested and busy anyway, and frustrating. I can't imagine what it'd be like with all these bigger vehicles coming through. So I think for safety and for the state of mind of the residents, as well as the people that are going to be working there, something needs to be done before this goes ahead. So yeah, that would be what I'd say. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. Anybody else? Any other comments from fellow members on the application? Okay, that seems not to be the case. Then I would like to give my comments. And again, I'm echoing wholeheartedly what Sharon and Steph have said. And I also welcome the additional 8 units, even despite some issues which have been mentioned, like the amenities and other issues. But so in principle, I really would welcome this. But the grave concerns I mentioned as my questions to Toby unfortunately remain, and Steph and Sharon have mentioned that as well. I really think we have to get this sorted first to make any provision, either having agreeing with the developer any sort of forklift truck, or trying with talking to the stakeholders involved, checking who is responsible, who's the owner for these sites, accommodating a temporary access to Verona Drive. Or a second one, I really think we have to get this sorted before we really can approve this application. So obviously does, like my fellow speakers before me have said, it has in itself nothing to do with the development, but the development would cause grave issues if it goes ahead before that's sorted. And I think much could be done perhaps for us. We need really to look into the LIP funding as well. And I would suggest that we would opt for a deferral of this decision with the strong recommendation in that we, as soon as possible, obviously I know the developers want to go ahead and want their planning application approved as soon as possible so that they can start. But I think if we could, as soon as possible, get our heads around working together with the developers, either going for an additional access route or looking with them into is it viable and doable to go for the forklift truck. And in the meantime, also I think Mr. Shapeshaft has also the issues around the CPZ. So there's lots of interesting comments he has made in that sweep of looking into this. I think it's, and having that LIP funding available anyway, I think it's worth having sorting this first before we really can allow the application. So hence I would suggest to put to a vote a deferral of this, with the caveat trying to sort these issues as soon as possible, and as soon they are sorted, I'm happy to have as soon as possible another emergency sort of start of the Borough Planning Committee, in order also to accommodate the planner and not getting them too frustrated. But I really feel strongly about our residents and the responsibility we have to them to get this sorted. If there's an emergency when the access is completely blocked, I think nobody wants to wants this, and it's just there are so many houses, so many people live down that end which could be affected. So I rather would, so before we moved, obviously if I bring the deferral to a vote, if that would be approved, it would be deferred, and if the deferral would not go ahead, then we would vote on approval, if I'm correct on this. Fiona and Henry.
Chair, we have a proposal that's been moved and seconded on the table to approve the application. The procedural advice would be that we would need to dispose of that proposal before we move forward.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, yeah, thank you very much, Fiona. Just because I had to move it to the debate, we couldn't have the debate before, it wouldn't have been moved. That's why I deliberately said I would now recommend to move it for the debate. So if I then would suggest to put the recommendation away again in order to put a deferral in.
Chair, may I just suggest
yes,
perhaps Toby might want an opportunity to respond.
Okay, yeah, sorry, thanks. Toby, please.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess obviously your concern is about the order with which these things happen, and I suppose the issue, I'm just wondering if there's another way around in terms of the issue in relation to the condition in terms of construction management plan, whether we can, when we look at that, we can bring that back for circulation to see whether there's any issues raised by that, because obviously that may well solve some of the issues that you're talking about. So I suppose that's another thing for you to think about. Because I think what you're saying is you don't necessarily have a problem with the application. It's just you want to ensure, in large part, that when this is constructed, it doesn't cause those problems. And I think it may be that could be dealt with under the condition 5 in terms of how we deal with that.
Yeah, thank you, David. It was exactly when I asked you the question about the conditions, and I thought from your answer, I found there wouldn't be a way. But if you say there is a way that we could put this in as a condition to solve these issues before the building, the developing of the site goes ahead, then I'm happy if we can put in a strong condition here.
Yeah. So the condition that we've got. So let me just focus on that slightly. So Condition 5 says all works on site shall take place in accordance with the following details, which shall have previously been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. Provision for loading, unloading materials, temporary site access. I think one of the things we may want to add is the routing of vehicles. I think we could add that. So, you know, this can't go ahead until we're satisfied that the construction, there's a way for the construction to happen in a safe way. Now, I think we have to make clear that there will be a way of finding a safe routing, but we will need to be shown that information, and unless we get something we're satisfied with and that our engineers are satisfied with, then it won't be approved. Now, that, you know, if we've still got the legal agreement to resolve after this, so I'm just having a look at that. So this development couldn't be approved until those elements were resolved, and then they would need to, once that's permitted, then they would need to submit the condition, and then we would need to work through conditions. So I think in terms of a start on site, I think we are a few months away anyway. But yeah, sorry, I noticed somebody had their hand up.
Yeah, sorry, Toby. So as I understand, you would be liaising with the highways officer to come to an agreement about the routing and the access for the site traffic, and could or may that involve a temporary parking permits for residents, or temporary parking on the grass, or but there seem to be a range of options. And as I'm hearing the rest of the committee say, really safety of residents and maintaining a good throughway is our priority looking at this development. So could you or the highways officer and the developer liaise with either the chair of the committee or the committee here as it stands, so that we can really be reassured that within a reasonably short period of time there are going to be some solutions?
And I mean, certainly, you know, we can certainly, I mean, people will be aware of this, but we can go further, and we can make sure that the committee are aware when this detailed submission comes in, so that you know, people have the opportunity to have their say. But obviously, what we would expect before that is that the applicant will have worked very closely with our engineers, and this is one of the things we will encourage, is them to get together with our engineers to work out what would need to happen, if there's anything particular that needs to happen, before they submit their construction management plan, so that their construction management plan covers all of these issues. So and then once it's submitted, and you know, our engineers would have their final look at it, but obviously you would have the opportunity as members of the committee to have a look at it as well, and feedback any comments. And I think that gives the certainty for everyone that that we need, and obviously it gives it would give the permission, which would then allow all of these things to start working through. But I would envisage that we're still a few months from approving that condition. So obviously that would require, the council and our engineers would have the opportunity to look at the other side of things. Well, are there any things prior to this happening that need to take place in Verona Drive, which could take place in other parts of Verona Drive.
Thank you, Toby. So just to recap what you said, because I only thought on the verbal after I took your first comment on my question about the conditions, perhaps the wrong way. So just to recapitulate, if we could go ahead with this, allowing the application and putting into the conditions that we strongly look into this again for the safety of the residents and making it as smooth and doable as possible after hearing all the issues mentioned. I know initially highways engineers and have not had any issues, but we had lots of strong feelings tonight for many people. And so if I got you correct, if you put it into condition to look into this again very strongly under these issues we have been raised tonight, then committee will also have a say in this if these conditions are met or not before actual development goes ahead. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So I think, you know, this will be an application which will be in the public domain. So, you know, it's open for people, anyone to have a look at that. I mean, we don't normally consult on these things. But, you know, if it came to it, I'd rather do that than to not make a decision on the application and then us come back in a couple of months' time to talk about the same issue. So I think we can do it the other way round.
Can I come in here?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So, Toby, would it be possible to absolutely guarantee that ward councillors and the chair of South of the Borough is informed and takes part in these discussions? Because I'm just concerned that highways might say, as they said, "Oh no, it's fine,"
Mm-hmm.
and it's just not fine in the current circumstances, in the current narrowness of the road. If this alleyway is possible, we really want that to be possible. So can we guarantee that ward councillors are kept in the loop and part of the discussion?
Yes, so I think this is how I would envisage it. I would envisage that the applicants would discuss this with the engineers. They would be obviously made aware of the issues which we've talked about tonight, and they would come to what they considered to be a solution. But then when that was submitted as an application to discharge the conditions, then we would make sure that went to members. It's not usual, but I'm sure we can make that happen.
I think this road is so unusually narrow. I haven't really driven down a road like it. And the way it's not just narrow, but here is access to other areas where people live. You know, it's not just that road that's narrow. It then goes on to, you know, the flats and other things. So
yeah,
it is unique, and that's why it needs to happen.
Yeah, it's fine. So I think you know, there would be consultation at that stage, and I think, you know, if there were any particular things which we wanted to discuss, then obviously we can come to the ward councillors any time and explain the issues, and those can be discussed. So that happens sometimes anyway. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Any further comment at this point? Okay, so then before I move this to the vote, sorry if I'm banging on this, you just gave the clarification to Steph, and previously when I asked you that you will consult the committee before anything goes ahead on these conditions. If we put that strong condition in, looking into how that could be mitigated, how the safety could be guaranteed, how we could potentially open the slip road, not the slip road, the additional access, or how the engineers and the developer could come up with a scheme which would emergency vehicles access through, that will then nodded up by ward councillors and the committee before it goes ahead. Under these strong conditions on this, I would put it to the vote. Can you confirm this as a condition, Toby? Obviously, you have to deal with the exact wording at some point, but in the spirit of this. Is this correct?
Yeah. So I think what I would be suggesting is that, in addition to the points that are agreed, that are there from A to L on condition 5, I would suggest also M, which would be agreeing routing of vehicles. I mean, it's obvious to say that would need to always ensure that emergency vehicles would do. But I think if we keep it simply to routing, then that covers all of those issues. It doesn't say which one will be chosen. It just says that will be the best routing will be looked at. And I think the other point that was raised earlier was about the sort of pavements and roads.
Yes.
And
yeah, I mentioned this. Yeah.
So I would suggest if we keep it as simple as that, then that ensures that those issues are considered. So does that make sense?
Okay, so M would then be the routine, and N would be the potential damage to the pavement.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. And O would then be that we consult with the committee and ward councillors on the arrangements.
So yeah, so I think on that, I think we'll see whether we need to put that in the decision notice, but I think that's really for us to ensure through our procedures that we do that. But that would be, I think, initially, I think we would be consulting the, I guess if we consult the people on this, in the south of the borough area, members on the south of the borough area, then that doesn't mean necessarily that this will go to committee. It will then be to decide whether that has to go to committee after members have looked at it. It may be that the solution everyone's happy with. So I don't think we want to prejudge whether that will necessarily come back to committee, but obviously it could do if necessary, or it may be that the chair's happy to agree that. So I think we'll decide the procedure, I suppose, in consultation with our the sort of guidance on how these should be done, once we've done that consultation process.
Sorry, I'm sorry to be pernickety, but I do think we need something in there about liaising with local members to ensure that we've represented the safety and the well-being of our residents on Verona Drive. Yeah, I don't want to preempt the wording, but I think we need something to that effect.
Okay. Well,
happy to agree the proposal.
Okay, I'm sure we can add something into the wording of that to ensure that that's in the air. But I think the most crucial thing is, obviously I think it would appear on the weekly list anyway, but we need to put that in there. But we also need to make sure that we actually make sure that happens. So we will do both of those things.
Fiona Cotter has indicated from Democratic Services that she would like to add something. Fiona, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking from a procedural point of view, so I need to be guided by Toby on the planning considerations. But from a Democratic Services and procedural point of view, we could add something into the minutes regarding consultation with ward members and the chairman. What I'm not clear on is, in planning terms, how that consultation stands, Toby. If it came back to committee and they or through the consultation members were not happy.
I think then we would then need to decide how that was determined. I think I'm not sure we can. I don't think we can sort of prejudge that. I mean, I think we are all hoping that we get to a solution where everyone's happy with this, as happy as people can be. So that will be our aim. But obviously, if we get representations from from members, then we will have to look at how we do that. And there are, I can't remember precisely what the Constitution says, but there certainly are procedures for bringing certain applications back to committee for a decision. I'm not sure whether our procedures automatically require these ones too, but I think there is an overriding one where I think the head of planning can ask for something to come to committee if they think it is of a significance such to do that, and that this could be one of those cases as well. So I think there's a number of routes to how it could come back to committee, but it may be that if everything is resolved and everyone's happy, that doesn't need to.
Thank you, Fiona, and thank you, Toby. And I think that basically is what we were asking for in the condition, that it's not just the developers and planning and engineers again looking into solving this, but that we also councillors, before it gets approved, have a look at it. I think in that spirit, I'm happy with this to bring it now to a vote if everybody agrees. Okay, so then with the additional condition M and N, M on the additional management of the construction work, and N the potential damage to the pavements in consultation with members of the planning subcommittee and the neighborhood committee. We go for a vote for this now. Fiona, could you please, or Henry, could you please start the roll call?
Yes, of course. So I'll ask each of you in turn whether you wish to vote for, against, or to abstain. After indicating your vote, would each member please confirm that you've been present for the whole meeting and throughout this item, please? So first, Councillor Stephanie Archer.
For, and I have been present throughout.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis Goodship.
For, and I have been present throughout.
Councillor Andreas Kirsch.
For, and I have been present throughout.
And Councillor Sharon Young.
For, and I have also been present throughout.
Thank you. So that is 4 in favour, 0 against, and 0 abstentions.
Thank you very much, Henry. So the recommendation with the additional conditions is agreed, and there are no urgent items on the agenda. And so thanks again to all officers, thanks to all members. And at what time is it? 27 minutes past 9, I close the meeting.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andreas.
Bye.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.